Hi, everybody. It's Michelle Hill, your legacy builder at Winning Proof, and I am here with a super duper special guest today, Michael Stein. And as I always do, I'm going to read his bio so I don't mess anything up. Michael Stein is an entrepreneur, actor, writer, director, producer, stand-up comedian, and personal development expert. Michael is the founder and CEO of Abadak Inc. I love that name. A company that he started with zero money and has since made $100 million. A little bit of change. He started his entrepreneurial career when he was 19 years old, becoming the #1 young nightclub promoter in Los Angeles. Michael has acted and worked with multiple Academy Award winning actors, filmmakers, producers, and Fortune 500 leaders, and is the host of the Longshot Leaders podcast. So with that intro, Michael, welcome to Winning Proof Unscripted.
Wow, that sounded so good. I said, you make me sound, but thank you for that. Yeah, it's nice to be with you on this beautiful Friday morning. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're just going to dive right in because we have a limited time today. So I want to know first thing, how in the world do you create a company while broke and in debt that eventually makes $100 million? What is that all about?
Desperation. um, I'll tell you my typical story is, it starts with, long shot leaders and then it goes back to the beginning. So, I consider myself a long shot. My grandmother escaped the Russian concentration camps on the way to America. My dad was a New York homeless street kid, became a multimillionaire, only to lose it all and become homeless again. I was born premature, unplanned child, had a lot of health issues, ADHD, didn't know what it was back then, had a speech impediment, I had health problems. Uh, the only success I had was making people laugh at a young age, made self-deprecation, and all kinds of volatility, crazy family, just a lot of obstacles. My mom would say, this is my dessert because I was a large family. I was the four, and she'd say, I wasn't planning on him. I ran up and down the stairs. I drank, I smoked, but he survived. And I was like, Mom, they just want to know if you want ranch or blue cheese. Could you don't have to tell everybody story, I was just, and my grandma would tell me that was my bedtime story. Lucky to be alive. I escaped the Russian concentration camp. So I was like, I'm lucky to be alive. I'm a long shot, and one day, like most American kids, I saw the movie Rocky, got super inspired. So there's a guy like me, he keeps on losing, but he keeps on getting back up. He's not smart because I struggle in school. I said the only difference in this guy and myself is he's physically fit. So then I became, obsessed with being physically fit. So I was like 11 or 12 years old, and by the time I was 16, I became a physical fitness trainer. I said, time plus effort equals success. So then my tutor said, what do you want to do? You're going to graduate high school. I said, I want to be an entrepreneur, a stand-up comedian, an actor. And she said, you might want to work with your hands because not everybody's meant to do what they want to do. So then I said, screw you. My dad never finished the 8th grade, a multimillionaire. I'm gonna do it anyway. So then I start my first business like at the day after high school because I wasn't going to go to college. And I made 2 sales like within 1 hour. I was like, I'm going to be, I'm famous. And then it was summertime. My ADHD's kicking me in the head and want to go see Top Gun. And I quit. I quit that. And I said, what, maybe my tutor's right. Maybe I just not meant to be successful or just do whatever. And then 6 months later, I decided I'm going to do stand-up comedy. And I was successful in bringing a lot of people there. I said, dance clubs were really big in the late '80s, and I said I could do dance clubs. And then within 6 months after that, I started promoting nightclubs and became the #1 nightclub promoter in my age bracket in Los Angeles. And I was like, ooh, time plus effort, but once again, success. So that's where I really met a lot of people. I was able to meet a lot of people in film industry. My first acting role was playing Dirt Diggler in the Dirt Diggler story, which is a short film that became Boogie Nights, which I appear in as well. I started, making movie parties, for the movie Batman and many other parties, and I became somewhat you would call so very successful at early age, and then I said, well, I want to leave my nightclub business and become a filmmaker and an actor so I could do this full time. And I left everything to become a production assistant. And that I put all my money into a short film. And it did really well, made a lot of money, got bought by HBO, but it didn't make all its money back. And I was in development hell to make another movie, make a feature film. That's how, you get your calling card as a short film to make a feature. So I said, I want to make my own movie, but nobody wants to make my movie. So I'm just going to become an entrepreneur again. I'm going to make my own movie because I was broken in debt. So I made the desperation was to make this film and to start being an entrepreneur again. And that's what I did within 6 months. I made enough money to make Love Hollywood Style, which is a film with Faye Dunaway, Andy Dick, and Coolio, and many other actors that you've seen. I wrote, directed, produced, acted in it. And it didn't make all its money back. And I said, I almost bottomed out this business trying to make this movie. And there's many other stories along the way, but I said, I'm going to take care of this business. And since it has made well over $100 million since, and that's why I do a podcast called Longshot Leader, because I said, if there's a lot of people that had a lot of ups and downs, I was going to do that kind of podcast. And that's kind of like the Reader's Digest version of my story. And that's why I do that podcast. And that's kind of like, I fit that kind of mold of people that have, personal development, which I got heavily involved into along the way. And I identify with people that have had a lot of failure and success and how to maintain the success after all that learning experiences of failure. That's my story.
Well, I love that. Yeah, that's your story and you're sticking to it, right?
Right. Yes. That's it. That's there's more to it, but that's who I am in a nutshell.
Exactly. Well, that is awesome. And I think the secret is the ones who succeed are the ones that don't quit. And you could have quit many times through that with many excuses of ADHD. I don't have any money. I'm broke. I didn't make enough money back. And just, whatever, all the excuses. What kind of just made you work past those? Did you ever have those moments? And what brought you past those to become a long shot leader?
Yeah, I idolized my dad. He made a lot of money. I've seen a lot of failure and success with him, So when I was a kid, he was like extremely good looking guy. He looked like Elvis and he was very, he was a rock star. And he had a tool business in the late 60s. And then he left it to do this concept. He had an idea to do a mail order campaign in Canada because his brother at International was up there selling these calculators. Calculators used to be big and then they got smaller. And he did a mail order campaign and that made like $2 million within like 16 months. And that was like in early 70s. That was like a huge thing. And it was a crazy lifestyle. And he burned all his money and he became homeless again eventually. Incidentally, that business that he had a partner in the late 60s that he left to do the calculators. That business partner in 1975 started a company called Harbor Freight, which made billions of dollars. Alan Schmidt. And my dad's still friends with these guys. So I see these guys. I'm like, wait, my dad had this volatility of failure and success. And the one thing I grew up with, though, that I learned from him is to be a hustler. That was like a good thing. You heard that word all the time. Be a hustler. I'm like a 4-year-old kid to be a hustler. So even in the 70s, that song "Do the Hustle," was like a big thing. So I remember there's pride in Rocky. There's pride in getting knocked down and getting back up and being a hustler. So that was like my credo. So it really, growing up in LA also, like you see a lot of movies and you're like, this is just part of my story of the failure. I get to have a good comeback story. So it really didn't matter how much failure I had. You just need a little bit of success to spark a flame. And that's what happens, and that's the way I look at everything right now. Everything is always hardest in the beginning. Like right now, we started another company called Bolator Backpack Company. We anticipate that's going to be a household name.
I see
And
that in the background.
that's right. I got the Bolator podcast attached to that. It's a big outdoor company. It's going to happen, and we just launched it. And it's always hardest in the beginning. So no matter how much failure I have triggered my mind to talk about neurolinguistic programming. I've conditioned myself to say, this is the process, no problem. And no matter how bad things get, it's just part of my story that I get to tell once I succeed.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you truly are entrepreneurial. And as a fellow fitness trainer
Mhm.
from the past,
Yeah. Hey, look at that. You look like you got the guns on there. Yeah, I could see it. She flexed for me a little bit.
25 years later, I'm not a fitness trainer anymore, but I'm still weight trained. But with the fitness training and the personal development, all the how our minds work with our bodies and the NLP and all that, just I don't know. I guess my question is, like, how did you harness that? How did you harness that watching your dad, all of the ingredients that are present, that were present, that you saw and observed, and maybe got some DNA? There's nature and nurture. How did you harness all that to just create all these different entities, businesses and fitness and filmmaking and everything that you do? And I hope that question makes sense.
Yeah, how do you harness the energy? Because that's the
Yeah,
lifeblood of the engine.
yeah.
How do you pick, it's just something that, it builds up into a crescendo after time plus effort, right? So, yeah, and also you create a pattern, right? So, you can have I've had negative patterns and I've had positive patterns. So when I wasn't cognizant of this, and really helped is that during a negative pattern. So when I was a nightclub promoter, I did really well. My girlfriend at the time, her dad was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood. And then we broke up and I was in love with this girl. And then 6 months later, she says, you're better than this. She's so great. She's younger than me. And it was time for the relationship to end, but she was so good. She calls me and says, you should get into Tony Robbins. He's friends with my dad. And this is when he had those infomercials. So the guy with big teeth, that tall guy. And the infomercials, she's like, yeah, no, he's friends with my dad. He's a good guy, and the people are getting results. And I said, I would do anything she does, she would just to do because I loved her so. And I was like, all right. So I get the program and I totally, you know, make it. I do another big event at the Park Plaza Hotel, which was like the grand old Opry of LA. And 4,000 people, I did that big event and I started promoting it again, but and then I failed again. I was like, my heart wasn't into it. I wanted to be an actor and a filmmaker. So I I said that doesn't work. So this relationship, it doesn't happen overnight. So then but I would always go back to those tapes, and then I would always go back to personal development, Tony Robbins,
Mhm.
and other people, and two steps forward, one step back. Eventually, it's like putting deposits in a bank. So it adds up. So that's the way I look at things. I'm like, did I really grasp all of that I just learned at that seminar, or this or that? And
Mhm.
sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just get 10% out of, but you get more than you had before. And that's how success is that my dad would say, chip away day to day,
Mhm.
and that's what you do. And sometimes you get those big wins and you ride them, and you keep your powder dry and you hold on to the success so when the failures come, that you could sustain them and continue to grow. But that is what pushes you forward, and building momentum and building patterns. And you learn about patterns with NLP, and Tony Robbins talks about patterns so much. And then you create to be methodical about it. You create a methodology of in your nervous system, like the triad of emotions, to where saying, look, whenever tragedy strikes, there's a winning formula, and that is, it starts with your physiology, your focus, and your words. So in the day to day, what does that mean? It's like, oh, I feel like, I'm going into the pattern right now, playing video games instead of like working on my business. Well, you have to change your physiology, change your focus, and change your words. And they have to lead you in a direction that's going to be the recipe towards achieving the goal, as opposed to, you're in a pattern right now that's not going to give you your overall goals. It's going to lead you to failure. So you have to be cognizant of those. And other people have these levels that they do, whether they say, well, I don't do that. Say, well, you do that. You just have unconscious competence, to where you have to start to study these things, and you create you have unconscious incompetence, right? You don't know how to what you're talking about, and then you discover it. You have conscious incompetence. You don't know how to take care of it yet, and then you have conscious competence, and then eventually you're succeeding so much to where you have an unconscious competence, and you're not aware of how you're doing it. You're just doing it because you've learned it, and that's kind of like in a nutshell, a reader or a real quick way to explain to you that how this pattern works and how you push yourself along eventually.
Yeah, and that's so true because I'm reading Lewis Howes' The Greatness Mindset,
Mm.
and I love personal development books. You can see I have, the 10X rule behind me, and I
Yeah,
just love personal development myself. Never been to a seminar, never been through a program, but I read, and that's how I gather that. So I totally understand that. And so I have to ask you, since you did go to Tony Robbins and you have been the recipient of other personal development leaders, do you have a favorite personal development leader or a
no,
couple personal development leaders that have been really, really influential to you?
it's not even close. It's Tony Robbins. I've done
Okay.
everything he's ever done. So I did all these things. I've had a long journey of like, yeah, I'm embarrassed to admit it and all that. No, but so what happened was is I listened to every bit of content he had, and I read it and I've listened to it throughout the years. And then when I started this business, I had very, financially successful quickly.
Mhm.
And I said, well, I'm going to double down on personal development. So I said, I'm going to go get a personal coach. I called Tony Robbins, company,
Yeah.
and they said, all right, so great. You've done all this content. What seminars have you been to? I said, I've never been to a seminar. I was like, what? This is, and I said, yeah. I said, I don't have time to that. No, no, you understand. Tell me your problems. And I said, well, sometimes I know this stuff, but I don't apply it. He goes, the reason why the seminars are so good is because and you're in an environment of immersion, and you'll have this, that you get it in your nervous system, because I could tell you what a strawberry tastes like, but until you taste it, right? So there's intellectual knowledge and there's physical knowledge. Intellectual knowledge is you understand the concept. Physical knowledge is where you apply it and you start doing these things using that, and it gets in your nervous system. So then I went to one seminar in Lisa Power Within in LA, and then I ended up doing every seminar he's ever done. I've been in Fiji, I didn't do a seminar out there. I actually won the trip, but I've done everything he's done. And then from there, I looked at other people
Mhm.
because I wanted, it's like Kung Fu, or, I want to learn karate. I want to learn it. I look at Wayne Dyer. I look at everybody.
Mhm.
And, but I always go back to Tony Robbins because I just like what I've learned from him. And it just makes sense to me. 60 Minute Psychology makes sense to me. Maslow's he's taken from the greats and he's used it on his, and really, if you want to learn from people, learn from the best.
Mhm.
So there's an old saying in the personal development world,
Mhm.
and a lot of I've got friends that are in that world, and they'll say, "Well, there's Tony Robbins, and then there's everybody else." So not to say, but I'm that guy. I kind of like what if I had to pick a favorite, it's definitely him.
Yeah, definitely. And I have his book, Awaken the Giant Within,
Right.
over there in my bookshelf. So it was one of the best personal development books I've ever read. It was just phenomenal. So I understand that. Totally
Yeah.
understand that. So before I get to my very last question, what was it like for you to dip into the film making process and be an actor? I mean, did you first feel like a fish out of water, or did you feel like, oh, this is my destiny? I belong at this table.
Yeah, it's interesting. I felt like, growing up in LA, I felt like, no, I belong here. In some sense, I was like, no, by the time I started doing that, I had success in other things. Um, but even before I had success as an entrepreneur, I was as I was promoting my first nightclub, I was an extra on a movie called Lesson Zero, and it was a big party scene. I spent 3 days with this other extra, and I got to meet, and he introduced me to Robert Downey Jr. because he was an extra, and he was around there, and we hung out with him and all these other actors, and Andrew McCarthy and all those guys. And then it took me a couple of his movies, but the guy I hung out with for 3 days, we're like best friends for 3 days, was Brad Pitt. And I was like, holy shit. I said, I've seen this river flow so many different ways. This guy was like coming out from Midwest and he had nothing and he was passing around the football as an extra, and then now he's doing that. It's like, this is doable. I could do this. But then I realized that Hollywood is hard. I think business is so much easier to make millions of dollars. To me, is easier than being dependent upon other people to hire you. And it's just such a 30 auditions to get one gig, and I'm like, screw that. And then my goal was to be an entrepreneur first. I wanted to be the calculator kid. And my dad was a calculator kid. I want to be that guy. So when hurricanes came around, I still wanted to be an actor. I was doing this tarp business, tarpplus.com,
Mhm.
and these hurricanes would, hit the United States. And then I bought everybody out, in the United States, all their tarps. I sold out all my inventory. And then they started calling me Hurricane Mike. So I was like, you know what? It comes full circle. I thought that was stupid at the time. I'm like, I don't want to be Hurricane Mike. But anyways, I wasn't the calculator kid. I was Hurricane Mike. And I said, you know what? I might not be an actor or a filmmaker, and it's still, I love to do that, but I get to do that in my commercials that I make for my business. And I get to, do that. But I was always felt like, and I feel like anybody, just, and now it's wonderful to see social media because now you can see influencers and everybody has a piece of this pie. You go out and make content today. Isn't that wonderful? You can go play the lottery. You can build content online, and there's a chance for you to be a filmmaker, an actor, a comedian, just at your fingertips. It's a wonderful world, actually, if you think about it. And that's how I look at it. Anything's possible. I wasn't surprised. I felt like, nope. If anything, when I made my short film and won a lot of awards, it won, the largest short film festivals in the world, Palm Springs, Oberhausen in Germany. I was like, and it got by HBO. I'm like, this is, and I saw my friend Paul Thomas Anderson, do this before me. And he did, when he did Hard Eight, his first film, then he did Boogie Nights right afterwards. I'm like, and he got nominated for Academy Award. I'm like, this is just totally doable. There's no reason why this, and I remember driving around, we had no car, and him coming up. I'm like, this should happen. There's no reason why it can't. And everything is like that. So I was never surprised. Um, I was surprised to see how much success he had in the beginning. I was like, holy shit, because that was, like a skyrocket.
Wow.
But everybody has a chance to do this. It's just time plus effort or the right application. So no, never surprised anymore. And not back then. I felt like it was something that you can achieve. Just have to be the right place, right time, right essence, and all that. So that's why I feel about it, and I feel very passionate about that today. Mic drop. I don't know. That's how I feel. I think
Okay.
a sip of my water because I was,
It's unscripted. It's
it,
Winning Proof Unscripted. That's okay. You can take a drink of water, please.
I'll add one more thing is everybody can grab their cell phone today and something can happen if the right essence, the right timing, the right, message, and you can blow up. I love that, so I think that that's how I look at, if you should expect something, expect it. And who knows, maybe you'll get it.
Yeah, I love that. And it always amazes me on Instagram that the baby and toddler videos get like multiple hundreds of thousands of views. That just always amazes me
Yeah.
to no end.
Look at the Hawk Tui girl. I mean, if you told me that if you play, I don't know, are you familiar with the Hawk Tui girl? Okay, everybody is, right. So this girl was like in, I don't know, New Orleans or something, and they're interviewing her in the street. And it was pretty, I don't know if this is a G-rated show you got here. You're allowed to swear or whatever.
Kind of.
Well,
But
he's like, "What's your body count? Like how do you keep a guy?" And she's like, "You got to get up there and give him that hot tui, And then she was like, blowjob reference. And for some reason, she didn't have any social presence. Maybe scarcity was her thing. But people were like, "Who is this girl?" And it became a thing where they started playing it everywhere. And now this is her production company is called 16 Minutes because she's trying to get more than 15. and she's doing it, and it's a phenomenon, and who knows why things click, but it did.
Yeah, that is a phenomenon, how one thing and people trudge day after day after day posting their Instagram thing. I've done it,
Mhm.
nothing. And then you get one random weird thought and just people grab onto it. That is just amazing to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
So,
awesome.
so if we have time, my last question to you, besides where people can get a hold of you, which we'll end with, is you talk about your top 10 point recipe. And as a home chef, that's a foodie, recipe grabbed my attention. So what can you give us your top 10 point recipe
Yeah,
to
I'll
set you
start.
up for
I
success?
won't give you the whole top 10, but you can go on the website and you can check it out. But I'll start to give you the essence. So first
Perfect.
thing you want to do is no matter what you're trying to get in life, or what you're trying to achieve, is that you want to get scope of the situation. You want to understand the who, what, where, why, when, and how. Toyota used to ask themselves, why is this? Why is that? The five whys. What I like to do is ask myself the who, what, where, why, when, and how at least five times. Now I'm going to get an understanding, like, what's going on here? What's reality? Where do I want to go? Where do I, who, what, where, why, when? Okay, then you start to do that. Once you start to do that, I would start to get involved in personal development. I would start to understand why you do what you do and why other people do what they do. Once you have scope, okay, that'll give you a better understanding of where you want to go specifically. Because you say, well, I want this or I want $1 million. It's like that's so you want to be able to understand, six human psychology or psychology in general. You want to be able to understand your emotions because that's what's going to be once you get focus on what you want, you're going to need to, have a vehicle on how to get there. Right. So, like a race car, they say when it spins out of control, they tell a race car driver, don't look at the wall. Immediately look at the track where you want to go, and your hands are going to start to follow. Same thing with that. Okay, well, your the triad of emotions. Okay, once you understand all these things, then you're going to want to understand what's your triggers. Okay, so the triad of emotions are your physiology, your words, and your focus. You're going to want to be able to utilize that to get you in the right direction. I'd also say, write down lists, get familiar with Excel spreadsheets and start to understand, start to break things down so you could, have clear focus on this is what I'm going for, and then constantly check in and gauge.
Mm.
Am I going towards that? What's the timeline? Set a time limit towards that goal and work your way back. Okay. So that time limit, you have to make sure that you are working towards because if you talk about it, it's a possibility, but if you set a time, it's going to be real. Okay. Not only there's, the first thing is I would say, even before, right after scope, I kind of skipped over this one. Take care of your body and your mind. If you got to take care of your health and your mind. So if you don't do that, so I would get scope of the situation, but right in parallel to that, yeah, I would start exercising every single day. Now it doesn't mean you have to be a fanatic, but I would get some type of exercising and then feed your mind every single day. Those are like I think about five, and I would do all those and just be consistent. Consistency is important. And the
Yeah.
last thing I'll say is maybe I'll give you a six, and that is you this is easier said than done, but constantly show up every single day, and if it's two steps forward, one step back, you don't be discouraged. Continue, um, and put just do it. Do something every day. I can't say that enough because people like want the magic panacea, but the nuts and bolts of like when it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you're trying to, you find yourself dwindling or swaying off, you know, get up and do some jumping jacks and push your dopamine up to go in the right direction and look at that list that I told you to make and then get back on track because that's the biggest, when people have high achievers, the biggest problem they have is they lose focus during the day,
Mhm.
and then you're not operating off of nines and tens. That's when you get to high level, like the long shot leaders, the most successful people is like, so, I found myself, I didn't operate off of a 9 or 10 today. And the biggest, algorithm that I've learned is that people that recognize that pattern and that stay consistent and they say, okay, I'm just falling in this pattern. It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm kind of swaying over towards this. I'm going to do something physically to get me back in that pattern, and then focus on, what my goals are for today, and get back and change that, not to, change that pattern interrupt. Those are the 5 or 6 that I would stick to right there. It seems discursive the way I explained it, but once again, it all makes sense if you start working on, start with scope, and then spend time and to understand these things. And that's why I say, those other things come into play. So when you're putting money in the NASDAQ 100 and you're trying to, like, become a multimillionaire one day in your sleep, all these things make sense to you because you've learned them along the way. So you had scope, gotten personal development. So that didn't explain all 10, but those 5 or 6 are the essentials, and the foundation of what, how to become successful.
Yeah, and thank you. And maybe we can put the link to the top 10, recipe.
Well, that segues me as the next one, Michelle, because that you can go to my website, Michael Stein Media, and you'll see it there. So you can just
Okay.
go there and check it out, and that'll show you everything else that I'm doing. I have 3 podcasts: Longshot Leaders, the Stein Time Show, where I talk to comedians, and then Bolator, which is my new outdoor backpacking company, which you could find out all about that. And the Bolator podcast, where we talk to outdoor people that tell their outdoor adventure stories. And you could find out, all the other things that, a lot of stuff that we talked about on michaelsteinmedia.com.
Well, that is awesome. And I want to just digress just for a second, because all the points that you did give are really foundational, because I've worked in my book and publishing consultant business. I worked with a lot of former pro athletes, and they follow the ones at the top tier. They follow that same recipe, those few things, and I'm sure the other things that make up the 10, but they do that same thing. And they also, when they have that defeat moment, after a big loss, they allow themselves 5 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, whatever. They create a defined time to sulk, to pound the wall, to get mad. And then when that time's over, it's over. It's on to planning for the next game. So that's what I kind of got out of what you were saying, is that you can't wallow in it. You have to have a plan.
The last thing I'll say is that, that when I was struggling in that number 6, I was saying consistency or whatever, trying to find the next thing. That's my ADHD or whatever you want to call it. And that happens. And people, when they start to, because somebody said, Mike, you're really successful. It's like, I'm still the kid that feels insecure, that imposter syndrome. And I still have not even finished, the chapters of where I'm going to achieve with my company and everything else. But when you fumble over something, or you find, you say to yourself, that's okay. That's, everybody has a moment of a slip up or this or that. And it's like, why did I do that? I've come too far to make a mistake like that. That's normal. And that's what, people make. You don't think Warren Buffett's going to make a mistake today, or do something. Everybody does, or Tony Robbins or everything, look, Tony Robbins got a divorce, how does that's a really costly mistake, and everybody looks at him like he's perfect. He's not. We're not. None of us are. It's how you deal with those things. And that's the last thing I'll say. How do you deal with failure? You know,
Mhm.
become an expert at not failure, become an expert how to dealing with failure, and then how to get back on track to what's going to enable you towards your success. That's the last thing I'll say.
Yes, exactly. And I do have John Maxwell's Failing Forward somewhere
Mm,
in this library behind
yes.
me. So I really like that book too, because it shows you it's okay. It's not the end of the world. In fact, if you're failing, that means you're trying. If you're not failing at anything, that means you are staying in your comfort zone, in your cocoon, and you aren't doing one single thing because you're not failing. If failure is a byproduct of taking action.
Amen.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much for being here, for taking your time. I will put all these notes, all the links and everything that you mentioned into the show notes. And, if you like this, like and subscribe this, share it with your audience, because there were a lot of really gold nuggets in here today, and a lot of motivating information. So, Michael, I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. A lot of fun. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Until next time, thank you for watching another episode of Winning Proof Unscripted.